we have been looking at different voting groups and what some of the polling shows us with them. Today, we have a really important one for Donald Trump. With me, CNN senior data reporter, professor of numbers, Harry Enten. When we talk about Donald Trump, from the beginning of Donald Trump as a political figure, non-college white voters who did not go to college have been one of his key demographics.
It's been a key demographic for him. It's been his base. And this is what's so interesting, because we've seen so many groups this year moving in Donald Trump's direction. So you would think his core group, his base of support, would be doing the same. But in fact, it's moving a little bit away from him. So this is Trump's margin with non-college white voters. Unlike most voting blocs, this group is not moving towards him. It's actually moving slightly away. So you go back 8 years ago, he won him by 33. You go back 4 years ago, he won him by 31. Now what we look is we see that in the latest average of polls, he's only up by 27. Now that may not seem like a lot, but given that we're seeing these double-digit gains, say among black voters or among Hispanic voters in some of the polls, the fact that we're seeing this core group of supporters actually moving away from him, not just off of the 2016 baseline, but the 2020 baseline as well, I think that's a rather interesting development.
Shrinkage, as Donald Trump might say, based on what he said the last few days. Why could even a small difference with this group matter?
Why can a small difference with this group matter? Because look at what percentage of the electorate that they make up. So we can look nationally, right? Look at this. Non-college white voters make up 40% of the electorate. That's more than college whites at 29%. All other groups, voters of color at 28%. So this is something that we've seen throughout the board, right? Which is that Donald Trump is making huge gains with groups that make up a smaller percentage of the electorate, while he's losing a little bit. But these groups that he's losing a little bit of make up a much larger portion of the electorate. But more than that, we're talking about the US of A, where they make up 40%. Why don't you go to those key Great Lake battleground states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin? They have outsized import in those Great Lake battleground states. Non-college white voters, look at this. They make up the slim majority of voters at 51%, way more than college whites at 30%, way more than all other voters at 16%. So if you're seeing movement in the Great Lake battleground states among non-college whites, that could be a very big development, John.
Are we seeing movement in the battleground states among non-college whites?
Nothing quite like a leading question, my dear friend. Yes, we are. We're seeing the same pattern in the Great Lake battleground states that we're seeing nationally. That is small movement among non-college white voters. Again, you see it back in 2016, Donald Trump won him by 25. You see a small movement in 2020, Donald Trump winning him by 22. And look at that, what we are today. Again, Trump is ahead, but his margins are smaller. And when you have a shrinking margin for Donald Trump among his core group that makes up the majority of voters, it can make up for big shifts among smaller groups of the electorate. And this is why Kamala Harris is still in the ball game right now. It's because even though she's losing big league among groups that make up a small portion of the electorate, and she's making it up among groups that make up a big portion of the electorate, even if the movements are small. But it's clear here.
That is very interesting. That is a clear downward slope in these key states among his key demographic. And if I can,
just
for a second, again, as you're looking here, again, this is where Donald Trump has seen gains, but it's the smallest group in these top two.
That's exactly right. Among white voters and non-college whites and college whites especially, they make up a lion's share of the electorate. And so even if you're seeing small movements among these groups, among non-college whites, slightly larger among college whites, it more than makes up, or at least makes up for, the movement among voters of color, all others in this particular case, John.
All points to a very close election. Harry Enten, thank you.
15 days to go.
Very much.
Let's make it into it, music. Who the hell wants to hear questions, right? Let me hear that music, please.
Everyone, let's thank President Trump.
Nice and loud.
God bless you.
So play YMCA. Go ahead. Let's go. Nice and loud.
Here we go, everybody.
Was Donald Trump's 39-minute spontaneous dance party the closest we are getting to an October surprise as both campaigns enter the home stretch? There will be no big final debate. Trump's made that clear. Both campaigns now, of course, just focusing on turnout in swing states that will decide the election. When the Harris campaign started off, that was just back in July, joy seemed to be the central theme. But with the polls showing a dead heat, Harris and her running mate now attacking their opponent in more direct and stark terms.
Look, they pulled him out of interviews and his team admitted he's exhausted. Canceled another talk show this week. Look, give him a break. He's nearly 80 years old. He's out there rambling, moving around. We'll give him a break. But look, he's not up to this anymore, folks. He's not up to it.
Our next guest writes this in his latest piece for Vanity Fair. Quote, Trump suddenly seems not just lazy, weak, by dodging another debate, for instance, and old, but also truly out of it. Some days he makes it seem like the 25 in Project 2025 is a secret plan to execute the 25th Amendment if he actually gets elected, paving the way for, Lord help us, President J.D. Vance. Joining us now is Mark McKinnon, the writer of that piece, former advisor to John McCain and George W. Bush. Mark, always grateful to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being here. I honestly, we've been sitting here in the break talking about what we saw from Trump at McDonald's and kind of what he accomplished by doing that. He's clearly trying to troll Vice President Harris over what she has made kind of a central piece of the biography she's trying to sell to voters. But it's also a place that he obviously has, loved in public for quite some time. What is your assessment of this campaign move?
Oh, solid move for Trump. I thought it was really good. I mean, to your earlier guest point, it makes him just seem down to earth. He's still Trump, but he's hanging out with McDonald's with real people, talking about stuff that real people like. That definitely a good move. But my point in the Vanity Fair piece is that this thing is baked. There's not really many undecided voters at all. This is going to be decided. I think this is about the gaps, and this is the reason why I think Kamala Harris is going to win. When it's all about turnout, what's key is enthusiasm, right? Whose voters are more excited about going out to vote? And Harris has like a 10-point advantage. So that's one gap. There's a gender gap. She also has about a 10-point advantage on women voters. And then I think there's an early voting gap. As we see from the data coming in, like you just showed in Michigan, there's huge numbers of early voters turning out. Now, we'll wait to see until after the election what that really means. But generally what that means is that Democrats vote early. And so if those numbers are up, it's likely more Democrats. So I see a lot of signs that polling is not picking up. There are advantages for Harris, and I think that she's going to win.
So, Mark, I absolutely take your point, and obviously I put a lot of stock in kind of how you think about these things. I guess I have two questions. You mentioned a gender gap. We're also seeing it's really a double gender gap, right? Men are really going for Trump in significant ways, and I'm interested to know how you think that interacts. But also this question of, now when I talk to sort of my smartest Republican sources, historically, they would say if you're getting a voter off the couch who basically never gets off the couch, that person is a Democrat. And that is going to be different this time, that it's likely that person is a Republican. I'm curious what you think that means in terms of early voting and how that impacts things.
Great question. Let me handle them both. Number one, I'm in Georgia today, and I'm going to Athens tomorrow for a Charlie Kirk Turning Point rally. So just sort of counter to my own narrative, there's a reality out there that there are huge numbers of young men turning out for Trump. And these Charlie Kirk campus rallies, you just see a sea of young men and a sea of red hats. So this conventional wisdom that on college campuses it's all women and they're all voting for Harris. Well, go to a Charlie Kirk rally. I'll be there tomorrow, and I can report next week about what I actually saw. The low information voters is a good point, too. But I just don't think that I understand that everybody's going after those low information voters, but not a lot of them vote. I mean, that's why they're low information voters. They don't normally turn out. And I just don't think if they're not excited about Donald Trump before, I don't know why they would be now. So you fish in the pond where the fish are. And I think that's where Harris is going. And again, I just see a lot of signs that when you net it all out, women, I think, are going to make the difference in this election. Women are, you think about HRC PTSD, Hillary Clinton PTSD from 2016, and Roe. You add that up, I think that creates a real advantage among women and a bigger gender gap. Yes, there's a gender gap with men with Trump, but it's a much larger gap for Harris. And I think they're the ones who are truly excited, Casey.
Mark, what do you make of, I take your point that you think Harris is on track to win here, and I'm not trying to take away from that at all. What do you think is going on with Harris people who are saying behind the scenes, in a way, and you can see it in the changes they've made in their strategy, right? Putting her out in these interviews, making her more accessible, taking more risks, That's usually how people who are behind behave in a campaign, right? It's Trump that's pulling out of interviews, trying to, do more controlled settings to take fewer risks. What does that say to you about where they think they are?
It says to me that it's a smart campaign. Casey, there's only one way to run a campaign. You can either run scared or unopposed. She's opposed, so you run scared. You always run like you're 20 points down. The problem in 2016 is the Clinton campaign didn't do that. That's why I say there's HRC PTSD. People are not going to make that same mistake. They're going to run like they're behind. You got to run through the tape. And that's exactly what the Harris campaign is doing, and I think it's really smart.
Yeah, really interesting. All right, Mark McKinnon, I'm anxious to hear what you see in Athens, Georgia. Come back next week. We'll talk soon.